Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D News Plus again today for episode 3 of 3 in our series on plastic. You can also go back and watch this series again, if you want to recycle your way through it. We're not going to get mad about it. You can just do it as many times as you want. It's perfect every time. There's a little plastic recycling joke. I don't know. Go back to episode 2 and watch if you want to know how recycling works, and go back to episode 1 if you want to know where plastic comes from. But today we're going to talk about what a world without plastic would look like. So if you haven't watched those first 2, go back. So before we get into the actual title question here, we have a few things to cover. One thing that we want to cover that we didn't get to earlier is, why does it take so long for plastic to decompose? Why is it that plastic is so difficult for the environment to break down? According to the U.S. National Park Service, a plastic water bottle can take 450 years to decompose, which is a long frickin' time. 450 years. 450 years ago, there wasn't even a United States. That's crazy. We are pretty young, but still. It comes from the process of manufacturing the plastic. That's where the difficulty comes from. The end result that comes from that manufacturing is not something found in nature. Do you ever hear that phrase? That color is not found in nature. Plastic is not natural. This is a human-created thing. Sidebar. I used to work at a historic site, as many of you who have Googled me ever know. And at that historic site, we've had an ongoing archaeological dig since the 1950s. It's one of the longest ongoing digs in the country. They dig down from the surface at northern Michigan, right at the tip of Michigan's peninsula, and they can always tell when they get to certain time periods because of the trash that's there. They can tell when they get to the 50s because there's trash. There's always trash in that part. So archaeologists, in their dark sense of humor, because they are literally digging up dead people's stuff all the time, have a joke where they're going to know in the future when they got to our era, because there's going to be plastic everywhere. It's just going to be a layer of plastic that covers the earth everywhere that humans used to live. End sidebar. Kind of neat, though, and kind of awful. So the end result is, again, something that is artificial. It doesn't belong in nature, so there is nothing in nature to break it down. Bacteria can't wrap their little mouths around it and figure a way to break that into its component parts. There's nothing that can do that. So instead, it just sits there in the environment, like an artificial thing, like a rock that just would sit there forever. There are 2 types of decomposition, though. There's abiotic and biotic. Abiotic decomposition is when a chemical or physical process breaks something down. Think ocean waves or wind, sun. We mentioned it earlier with plastic in the ocean, plastic in landfills like plastic bags. There's biotic decomposition, which is when a living organism takes that thing and breaks it down. Microorganisms, like I was just mentioning. So with plastics, the link between the atoms, they're so strong that the microorganisms can't do it. And according to organic geochemist at Stanford University, Kenneth Peters, it's easier for organisms to synthesize peptide bonds than carbon-carbon bonds. I'm going to explain that a little more. Nice job, Kenny. Way to start the conversation. Peptide bonds are chemical bonds that form between molecules through a condensation reaction. Essentially, carbon atoms get with nitrogen atoms. And when that happens, organic molecules can come in and break down those bonds. They know how to do that. But manufacturers don't use peptide bonds. They use, as you may remember from much earlier now, carbon-carbon bonds. It's a carbon chain. If manufacturers could figure out how to use peptide bonds and make it last, they could make plastic that microorganisms could biotically decompose. But if they did, they would decompose rapidly. You can't make a peanut butter jar made out of decompositioned plastic, right? If it started to decompose while it was shipping to you or sitting on the grocer's shelf, that probably wouldn't work out so well for you. You probably wouldn't want to buy that plastic jar. Wouldn't make a lot of sense. So instead, they use the carbon-carbon bonds. They're harder to break down, but they last longer. So the reason kind of comes back to humanity and why we made plastic in the first place. The water, wind, and sun can break down those things to a certain extent, but it takes a long time, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, but they never actually decompose or biodegrade truly, and instead they just get smaller and smaller until we can't see them anymore, so now they're poof, gone. The thing is, they're still giant molecules in comparison to some in nature, so other things do have to live with them. So how small can plastic get? That's a great question. Glad you thought of it. Well, a 2009 study led by chemists with the College of Pharmacy at Nihon University in Japan, Katsuhiko Saito, took samples of water from all over the world. Producer Blair thought he would trip me up with that name. He didn't do it. I got it. I got the name. The United States, Europe, India, Japan, and a few other areas were where they sampled this water from, and what they found was terrifying, that water samples contained derivatives of polystyrene. And when I say water samples, I mean all of them. Every single one from the United States, Europe, India, Japan, and a few other places contained derivatives of polystyrene. More research is needed to see what happens now, but essentially there's ocean plastic literally everywhere. Fortunately for us, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some little bastards out there that can actually eat plastic. There were 2 studies published in the Journal of Environmental Science and Technology that found mealworms have gut microbes that can break down styrofoam. During digestion, the worms released half of that as carbon dioxide, and the rest was pooped out as little teeny pellets. Early results from testing the pellets found that it might be safe to use for soil, which means if we give some polystyrene or styrofoam to some mealworms, we might be able to finally get it out of the damn environment. More research obviously needed, obviously. But super neat that it's possible. So what would our lives look like without plastic? I know that's where we started, and this is kind of a roundabout way to say plastic sucks. But without it, what would our lives look like? I mean, just look at what we've got working with here in front of me. There's plastic all up in this thing. There's plastic in between me and you right now, in the camera lens, inside of the camera, the body of the camera, here on microphones. Like, there's plastic everywhere, literally all over. I'm sure there's plastic in the set behind me. There's plastic everywhere. So we use plastic for a lot of stuff. Shopping bags, containers, water bottles, electronics. Without plastic, if you went cold turkey on plastic, the hardest thing would be to find alternatives to plastic. They do exist. We could go back in time, grab some glass. Glass used to be pretty ubiquitous. Milk came in it. You could get glass containers to carry food in. You could drink your soda out of a glass bottle. Glass is made from sand. You can melt it down. You can break it into tiny little pieces and it just becomes sand again. It's super renewable. There are also reusable shopping bags, like made out of paper, that you can break that down again by essentially getting it really wet and turning it back into pulp. You can turn that paper back into more paper, or you can just throw it in the environment, and if in the right conditions, it would just become soil. A lot of cities and states have already implemented laws requiring people to charge to get those plastic bags, to try and get people to use reusable plastic bags, the ones that aren't just made of paper, but the ones that are made of like a more plastic substance, usually made out of plastic. But they don't have to be. They can be made out of things like hemp and other more renewable resources. There's also a plastic replacement that comes from chicken feathers. That's right. More than 3 billion pounds of chicken feathers need to be dealt with in the U.S. alone annually. They're mostly made up of keratin, which is an extremely tough and durable protein. It's in a lot of life. A lot of life uses keratin. Researchers are trying to process chicken feathers with methyl acrylate to create a durable plastic, which is entirely biodegradable because it comes from a renewable resource. Chicken feathers, fingernails, hooves, whatever you want to make it out of. Keratin is awesome. But more research is needed, as usual. My favorite line. Shopping local also helps a lot, by the way. This is just kind of a personal DNews Plus sidebar, guys. Shopping local is great, only because most of the time when you shop local, that food doesn't come in a package. The packaging you see at a grocery store is mostly because the food doesn't come from your town. It comes from everywhere else, and they have to wrap it in plastic so that it doesn't degrade before it gets to your mouth. So shopping local does help a lot. And DNews Plus sidebar. With everything in our life revolving around using plastic in some form, and not just in a first order effect, not just a soda bottle. That soda bottle had to be shipped to you, and to be shipped to you is probably put in some kind of renewable plastic box. And that renewable plastic box may have been put in a cardboard box if you're lucky, but it also could have been put on a plastic pallet so that it could be moved around. And it was transported inside of a truck, which might have metal sides, but probably has plastic sides because plastic is lighter and thus has a better EPA miles per gallon for the truck who had to transport it to you, using hydrocarbons that it burned inside of its engine, which is mostly made of metal, which has recyclable parts in it that are made of plastic. Plastic is in everything, and the more you think about it, the more it's going to be part of your life, unless we decide not to have it there, ever. But that's up to you. What do you guys think? Do you want to get rid of plastic? You okay with plastic? Or do you just want us to find a better way to recycle it? Maybe we should make it not a business thing. Maybe we should make it a government thing. What do you guys think? We have a comment section. Fill it up with your thoughts. But before we go, I want to say thank you to our sponsor for this episode, The Great Courses. The Great Courses gives you on-demand access to a huge library of really awesome video courses from experts in their fields, perfect for people who like to learn things, which I assume is people like us here on D News. Check out Inexplicable Universe, presented by my boy, Neil deGrasse Tyson. It is awesome. And you can help us out by signing up today for your free month of unlimited access to The Great Courses by going to thegreatcourses.com/DNewsPlus. The link is in the description if you'd rather click on something. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Again, let us know in the comments how you feel about plastic after all this, and we'll see you next time.